Okay, so Cheryl, thank you so much for joining for this live question and answering session. I know that there are so many people who are searching for a healthy home or questions about how to make their home healthier because they have been environmentally injured by toxic mold exposures. And as an architect, I know that that's your specialty. So I'm really honored to have an opportunity to share some of your knowledge. And I know that this will just be very surface to kind of introduce people to your work and to some of the details. And at the end, we'll talk about some of the more in-depth classes that you offer and how people can connect with you there. But just to begin, I would like to ask you, what is your professional opinion of the ERMI as a mold test for people who are either searching for a new home or trying to find out if their existing home has suffered from water damage or toxic mold?
A spam call comes flying in. So, right, that's turned off. Sorry. So that's a great question, and I get a lot of, and it comes up in so many conversations. So ERMI is a dust sampling test that we're taking a screening test of dust to identify the history in a building, and then they identify the dust and look for mold spores in there. And I think if you find something with an ERMI test, there's a good chance that there is a problem in the building. And so that's, yeah. So I think if you don't find something with an ERMI test, I think the challenge then comes in is I would disagree that it means your building is clean and that it doesn't have mold. So because it is a screening test, mold is a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. And so if you get a negative ERMI test, that just means you didn't find mold on that day, at that time, with that test in the way that was tested, wherever you tested. It doesn't mean that there's no mold in the building or there's not mold at certain times of the day or night that is in the air and is affecting the quality of life for the people who are living there. So I think that's the challenge with an ERMI test. And I think the second challenge that I see is that there's checking, the major one is testing for 36 species and the Hertzme is testing for 5. There's hundreds of thousands of species of mold, and surely many of them are toxic. And many of them, we don't know what they are. We can't test them. And so if we have a negative ERMI test, that means you didn't find one of those 36 species, or in a Hertzme, one of those 5 species. And so does that mean that there's not something else going on in the building that actually is toxic and can be related to mold? And we just haven't studied that thing yet. So that's the other caveat and concern that I have about relying 100% on it. So I wouldn't rely on it. Well, as a building professional, I don't think it's a measure of if the building is safe as much as is a measure of it's a screening test. And we do that in health. Sometimes there's blood tests, we do screening tests, and you may, I know one time I had one for double-stranded DNA of some sort, and they never found it. And then one time they did. Okay, so yes, so I think it's definitely, if you find something with an ERMI test and you have something, the other challenge I have would be with Stachybotrys, which I don't feel like is weighed as accurately as it could be, at least for me. Stachybotrys is very toxic. It's also a very heavy, sticky mold spore and comes from long-term damage, and it doesn't go airborne. So since ERMI is testing dust that was in the air, if this is a mold spore that doesn't end up in the air very easily, then the chances of finding it are very slim. So I would suggest that if you found any 1 or 2 spores of Stachy, since it is an evidence of long-term damage, I would be concerned. But in any case, it doesn't substitute for a building inspection or even evaluating actual, you see water, you see mold, you see a leak, you see staining, and that start there. If you see mold, there's no point in testing it, in my opinion, because you have tens of thousands of spores to be able to see it. You can't see individual spores. And, so you test it, you're going to treat it the same way. You're going to clean it the same way. You should be concerned the same way, regardless. So
that really brought me to the next question that I had for you. If if ERMI isn't your first choice, like a lot of people in the mold community kind of will recommend to each other, you gotta get an ERMI, you gotta ERMI every house. So if that's not your first choice as a professional that specializes in healthy buildings, what do you like? What do you prefer as an alternative evaluation method?
I would like to empower people to check out their homes and walk around and look around. I have some courses that I sell that are basically my common questions that have come up, and it's going to mute a couple more people here that that teach people. So I get the same questions over and over, and I found myself saying the same things over and over to my clients. So I do take clients and consulting clients individually, and to be more affordable and accessible, meaning somebody could listen to me talk at any time of the day or night on any time zone, I started creating online recorded resources for people. And so I would empower people to think for themselves and start to really educate themselves on, where does this water come from? And how can I learn more about all the ways our buildings get wet, and then start looking at my own house. So I do virtual inspections using photographs. And so I recommend people do that. Take photographs of your home and look at them yourself on your computer and look around and try to find through my resources or other people's resources, what are common defects? What are the common causes that we have mold in our buildings, and look for those. There's some other screening tests though that I think are screening just same way that dust screening is a test, is testing your humidity. Mold doesn't grow without moisture. If there's moisture in the building, it's too high, it's going to have higher humidity. So that's the first thing that I test. And especially in heating seasons, when we're running heat, that's inherently drying. If you have high humidity in one room or many rooms or the whole house, then we need to start asking why. Why do we have that? Is it supposed to be that way? And what is high humidity, versus what's normal versus not normal? So I talk about that. And then there's also moisture meters that I share with people that are very affordable. I can show you some of mine I have here. I can grab over there, but that you can start testing yourself. So this happened to me. I'm an architect. I had a situation where actually my ERMI testing and my air sampling was negative. And I knew that my husband and my blood work showed that we were having a mold exposure, and I couldn't figure out, like, okay, well, it can't be negative. This is the only place where we both are together. And otherwise he's in a high-rise office space and he wasn't there that much. So I came to the same resolution for myself that I got to start thinking about this myself. But I did hire a lot of people who did testing, and they did this and this. And I thought, so because of my background, I could come to the conclusion that I needed to empower myself, and that I actually do know a lot. And what I don't know, I can research, but really everybody can do that. And I can help them research. And so that's my goal and my mission, is to empower people to start looking for yourselves and think for yourselves. And if somebody tells you something that somebody else said might not be 100% accurate or reliable, then allow your own brain to decide that I just don't know, maybe, and keep researching. So be open to be open-minded to, is maybe there's something else, because there's a lot of people who have good ERMI scores that are not well. That's the first clue. And I get them. They're my clients. I remediated and it was great. And why am I still sick? Or why is my building still sick? And yes, I find stuff all the time that somebody missed. So long answer to a short question.
So much for sharing that insight though, because I think the average person needs to hear that. And I agree that there are often visible clues or clues that you can smell that tell you a lot about potential past water damage. One consideration that I don't think people give much thought to is the exterior of the home. Could you just touch on if being mindful of the exterior of the home is as important as the interior?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two places that we look that are most important in building. It's the exterior and the bathrooms or water sources. So, and the exterior, yeah, there's a lot. So that's the first thing I ask to look at is send me pictures of the outside of your building. On all sides, I want to see the roof all the way to the ground. I want to see the context. So let's start out at the high level. And I recommend people do that themselves. Walk around your home, look around, check out my Moisture Basics course for 10 defects and the fundamentals to start with. But then walk around or just do it anyway. And just look around and say, is there anything discolored? Is there anything that's not the same as another place? Is the ground sloping away? Is the ground sloping towards my house? Are the downspouts just sloping towards my house and going nowhere? Go around your house on the exterior right after it rains. Obviously, this would be a daytime rain, or even better, go when it's raining. Get your rain boots on and your raincoat and your umbrella and get outside and look around. Are the gutters working the way that we think they're supposed to be working? Is there water pouring somewhere why is the water pouring over the edge of the gutter over there? I never knew that. And maybe that's a bad thing. In most cases it is. And look at these big puddles next to the foundation. In a couple hours, they might be gone. But you want to, that's not going to end well. And then we have things that with brick and stucco, siding, not so much, but sometimes there's something to see. But the materials that are absorbing water, brick, stucco, and concrete, they're very transparent in the first couple hours after it's been raining. Go out and look around. You'll see dark spots. So it's almost like one of these kindergarten tests of, what are things that are not like the others? And why would there be some areas that are discolored right after it rained and some areas that are not? Is that under the windows? Is that around a gutter? Is that where a gutter meets a wall? And then you start to and it'll be gone in a few hours, it'll dry. But that doesn't mean it didn't dry to the inside of the building. And so that's, then get your moisture meters that are, your inexpensive ones where you have all the time in the world to test and check around on the inside in those locations. But if you don't find something with the moisture meter, that doesn't mean that the outside isn't getting affected. And by the time we get some damage on the inside, it's because the outside is really damaged extensively. And just know that what's happening on the exterior, outside the layer of drywall, in the attic, in the crawl spaces or basements, or under the slab, that all of those things do affect the air quality in our buildings, regardless of what other people say. And I've been on a lot of conversations where supposed professionals will say, oh, that mold in the attic isn't going to affect people because there's drywall in between. And that's not true. There's no evidence of that. In fact, our buildings are not airtight. So the analogy I use for that is, say you have all your windows and doors closed and you run all your exhaust fans, run your kitchen exhaust, run your bathroom exhaust, run your dryer, your furnace. Are you going to run out of air? No. If you have a really tight building, you might end up with carbon monoxide that's getting dragged back in, but nobody has ever suffocated in their completely airtight house. Nature will find a way to make up the air pressure differentials. And if it can't get it from an open window or an open door, it's going to get it from your attic. It's going to get air from your wall cavities, from your crawl space, under your slab, in your basement. So and that's a complicated topic, air pressure differential. So that changes just which way the wind blows. So lots of complicated topics. And, but as an overview, I say, empower yourselves and start saying, I can do this. I'm going to start researching some things on my own. I'm happy to help. That's my mission. I originally started my business partly by accident because people started asking me questions. I was on social media looking for solutions to Lyme disease, seeing all these people talking about mold. And my daughter was affected 16 years ago. And then in retrospect, we were all affected and a lot of other things happened along the way. My husband ended up with Lyme disease about 5 or 6 years ago. I also have had Lyme disease and one of my children. But I started seeing all these people talking about mold and seeing things that I didn't think was accurate or were modern myths, and started answering questions, got tagged, and then more and more people started finding me. And little by little, I decided, okay, I need to make a Facebook group so that people can ask me questions for free, because I can't do this constantly. Let me just see. Because I can't keep answering. There's so many people coming. So many people need my help. And so then I created a Facebook group and then a website, and the rest is history. And here I am doing something I never would have thought I would be doing, but it is helpful for people. So I decided, it came to my family's doing well. I'm doing well, and I'm blessed, and I know that, and I feel like it's my duty and my responsibility to give back. And I know things that can help people, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how to ways to share them, like being on this call. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to find kindred spirits like yourself that are out there doing the same thing, and so many of us have a personal journey. And that's really critical for everyone here. We have to get together and talk about this stuff, and we have to educate ourselves, whether it's health or whether it's buildings, and start thinking for ourselves.
One thing that I learned from you from joining your Facebook group is the term damp rising. And I learned that term from just reading your Facebook posts a few months ago, and I implemented looking for damp rising on buildings while I recently was looking for a new place to live. I was wondering if, for the people who have not yet joined your Facebook group and have not yet learned that term, if you could tell us, what does the term damp rising mean on the exterior of a building?
Yeah, that's one you can see. So you're going to learn something, everybody who's listening to this today, that you can take and use everywhere you go, especially in the spring. So it's either damp rising or rising damp. And the term actually comes from the UK, where there's a lot of masonry buildings. So that's where I first started seeing it referenced with those terms. And so what it is we have, the soil is 100%, between 95 and 100% moisture content, no matter where we are. Certainly after it rains, it is very, very wet. And so just like a sponge will wick water, it's like if you put a sponge next to a little puddle on your countertop, it won't be just the edge of the sponge that is wet. Water will wick into the sponge much farther. So a sponge is very similar to concrete, very similar to wood, and very similar to masonry, which is brick. So those materials in particular, some other materials might be also similar, but those are the main ones that we see, that's water moving into our building by capillary action. And again, this is a topic that I spent a lot of time on in the Moisture Basics mini course that I offer. So you can hear all about it more there. But basically, water is wicking in like it does into a sponge and soaking into materials, and can go against gravity. So rising damp or damp rising is going against gravity, and the water is wicking up into the building from the ground below, a puddle next to the foundation. It can be something inside the building that is wicking water up into the wood framing and into the drywall. Drywall is also porous. So look around when you see commercial buildings where there's a sidewalk and a brick building or a concrete building, and you'll oftentimes, wherever there's a puddle's been settling, or it might be a little darker, you also see the damp rising, or the rising damp of that moisture wicking up into the material it's adjacent to, and you can see how high it will go. And it can go up to several feet. And that's just capillary action from cell to cell, the water is moving. And that can happen in a lot of different places in our buildings, which is why it's one of the more complicated types of water damage to find, but not impossible.
Thank you for explaining that for people who might not be familiar with the term. I personally found it a interesting way to rule out houses that I might not want to have a big problem with the exterior for. So I found that helpful just from reading your group. When you're designing homes, what is one design technique that you love to implement for the house, and the reason why?
I think the most impactful, well, there's might be two actually. Let's see. I think the most impactful one that for a starting point is the grade, the drainage around the home. And So often our builders are, and even architects, sometimes when they're using architects, but designers, they design the building on a flat line, so like the ground is a flat line, which is actually not code. Code is telling us that we have to expose our foundation 6 to 8 inches above the finished grade. Grade is the ground. And then our ground all around the building, all the way around, has to be sloping away from the building noticeably. And that is a number. So it's down 6 inches in 10 feet. So if I were to have a straight line, then I need to go down 6 inches, 10 feet away from the home. And it's a 5% slope. It's very noticeable. Sidewalks and driveways can be a 2% slope, which is less, but the grade of the dirt. So you need to have exposed foundation and then the ground slope away. And so I would start with looking at homes that I look at them and say, oh my gosh, this house is in a hole. And look at the neighbors. Are all the neighbors higher? Okay, that's not a house you want to deal with because it's not going to be easy to fix. Is this house on top of a hill and everybody's lower? And even if it's flat around the house, can I improve the drainage easily? That might be worthwhile. But so the biggest tip I can suggest for people, I think, that is a very, very common defect is allowing water to sit next to our foundation and then doing all these other tricks like, oh, we're going to waterproof. We're going to have this company come out and put it into your drain tile. And why you would bring water into your building, I have no idea, and just manage it. It's like, my boots are leaking. I just need to put a drain in my boots. Why would you, oh, my raincoat's leaking. I just need the water to drain out. No, let's just not have the water get in. And one way to do that passively is just to not let the water be against the building. The second design technique I would suggest is big overhangs. And that means an umbrella over your building, basically. So the bigger your overhangs, the bigger overhangs that a building has, the more protection the walls have, just like if it was an umbrella. And so if there are other defects, they're protected a little bit more because there's overhangs. That tends to be a little more expensive because you're building a roof over a house that's smaller. So your roof is bigger than your house. But so those would be two, but start with the drainage around your home, whether it's a home you're living in or whether you're looking at homes, and start looking at the neighborhood. And is that neighbor, is there downspout dumping on this house? Okay, so now you got to figure out your neighbor's problem and you got to figure out how you're going to get your neighbor to do something different. There are usually laws and statutes and codes around that, but it's a dicey situation. Whether people, and how much space is there? Wow, it's all sloping down to this house, but there's only 5 feet. That's a lot harder to work with than if you have a little more space on the sides to work with. So drainage, site drainage, and that kind of dovetails into your rising damp thing. So it's a good combination, I'd say, to check both things.
That, as much as that surprises me, because I don't know why I thought that you would say something for the interior. I also see how much that actually really impacts a building. As you were speaking, I was thinking just 2 months ago, we had viewed a house that the basement had such an awful mildew smell, and most of it was finished, so I couldn't see the brick, but in the room where the sump pump was, I could see some exposed bricks that were completely wet and rotted black. And so that house was a hard no because I reacted and also because I saw a water problem. I went to go check the exterior and it was exactly as you are describing. The drains from the gutter were not drained far enough away from the house, and puddles had accumulated and they were going right into the foundation. Mm-hmm. So while I could see one corner that was affected, I'm fairly certain that all of the corners that had the puddles were also affected and just not visible. So it really goes to show how much people can underestimate the exterior portion of their house for interior home health. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable tips and insights. I believe that people who have watched this will want to know more information about how to connect with you. Would you mind sharing the name of your YouTube channel, Facebook group, and also your website that has the courses that you've mentioned so that people can find them and connect with you on a more in-depth level for help with their healthy homes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. So my name's Cheryl Ciecko, and then put architect at the end. So my Facebook page is my public page is Cheryl Ciecko Architect, and most active there. My YouTube channel is Cheryl Ciecko Architect. And my Facebook or my website is either CherylCiecko.com. It's not a stage name. So I also have avoidingmold.com. So my name can be hard to remember. So you can start out at avoidingmold.com. And I think you can find me in all those other places. Also, I am on LinkedIn as well, and I'm looking to move into some other platforms. But my courses are available under the Educations tab. There is a link there also to schedule a consultation with me, if that would be something that would be interesting. And get on my newsletter at the minimum. I share a lot of specials, and we have special deals. We share them there, and I share monthly insights. So we're getting more into videos along with Q&As and common questions people are asking at that time of year. I do have a webinar coming up on March 11th. We're just starting to advertise it, talking about ice dams and other winter damage to roofs. So that also can be condensation. So winter water damage is what we're going to be talking about, and how our buildings get wet in the cold seasons and due to cold temperatures. And so if anybody's interested in that, keep checking out it's going to come up for our registration very soon. I'm bringing on a master roofer. His name is Bob Kelly, and so he's going to be joining me. He sees a lot of this damage, and so we're going to talk together about that topic, or those topics, I should say.
I'm interested in taking your class because I am very new to this home owning thing, and I want to make sure our house stays in a good condition. So I'd be very interested in learning more from you. So, and I'd love to get on your newsletter email list. I know that next week we are going to switch the roles a little bit, and you are going to interview me about some of the health related aspects, which is my field. So I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you again next week, Cheryl. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, and that's on the 9th, is that right?
It's next Wednesday. I'd have to refer to a calendar to get that.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. I think I'll set that one up as a webinar. And yeah, I'm excited to share any information, and I'm equally interested in what you have to say and your experiences and how you're helping people, because I know that'll help my population of followers as well. And yeah, let's raise each other up and help each other out and keep learning things and sharing what we're learning and questioning the things that are discrepancies. You know, this person says that, and that person, you know, my remediator said this and Cheryl said that. Well, what's the difference? And I can usually explain why, but examine it yourself, you know. So we're smarter than we give ourselves credit for. And you're helping people with the health side, and I'm trying to help people get a step up in the fast track of the education.
Well, avoiding mold is the more important part. I would, not that I want to get myself, you know, out of the healthcare field, but I would actually really prefer if I didn't need to treat mold injured people health wise, because I would prefer that they weren't sick and suffering. But I think avoiding mold and good air quality really takes precedent over health treatment. And that's because health treatment wouldn't be necessary if we had healthy homes and healthy air quality all over, but we don't. So that's why we're working together to best serve our populations. And thank you again so much for your time, Cheryl.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for being here. My Facebook group is Avoiding Water Damage, Mold, and Toxins. So just so you know that, you can check me out there too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.